This is 6 minutes long, but felt really powerful. Upon rewatch recently, thought chat / you might appreciate it. Movies about Nazis stuck in Canada and run into immigrants there.
Barbarina, there's an electric storm playing all around us, frightening the animals and your chickens. Move over, Philip. What about you, Anna?
Andreas, one of our guests is speaking.
Eh? What? Oh, good.
We were discussing the Habermans.
I was about to say, you have one clear choice.
I gotta pee.
Where there is a question of blood, where one is governed by the deepest of racial instincts, then every other consideration is swept aside. Men like yourself, German or of German ancestry, rise up with all the might and power of the great German people behind you, conscious of the sacred duty that binds us all together, and in the knowledge that he who does not forget his people will not by his people be forgotten. There is a new wind blowing from the east, a great storm coming across the sea, a hurricane which will sweep aside all the old outmoded ways of life and mark the beginning of a new order not only for Europe, but for the whole world. Let those beware who would have the temerity to stand in its way. They will go down before its irresistible impulse and be crushed out of existence. But for those who accept the new order, for those who perhaps belong to it already, why need I use these parables of speech any longer? I mean all of you here tonight. Yes, you, brothers! I call you brothers and proudly acknowledge you as such. You who form the little stronghold of our people here in Canada, you will have your share of the happiness and prosperity that is waiting for us all. When the storm is over and the sun rises, that mighty sun, which will give us everything we need in life.
What son are you talking about, friend?
I am talking of the greatest idea in history. The supremacy of the Nordic race, the German people. I am talking of the being whose name I am certain lives in every heart, whose name hangs on all our lips, whether we can shout it to the world or only whisper it in one another's ears. Germans! Brothers! I ask you to join with me in paying homage to our glorious Führer. Heil Hitler!
Heil Hitler!
Anton Wahlberg, the guy with the goatee, was Austrian and very popular with the Third Reich and fled because he was gay and Jewish. Or a loss. Major L.
I don't ask where you come from or what brought you here, although you've left us in no doubt as to your beliefs. Someone has given you, no doubt deliberately, a completely false impression of us. We are only one amongst many foreign settlements in Canada. There are thousands of them in this part of the world, and they have been founded recently, some 80 years ago, by people who left their homes in Europe because of famine, because of starvation, because of racial and political persecution, and some, like ourselves, because of their faith. Some came only to find new land, new boundaries, a new world. But all have found here in Canada the security, peace, and tolerance and understanding which in Europe it is your Führer's pride to have stamped out. You call us Germans. You call us brothers. Yes, most of us are Germans. Our names are German, our tongue is German, our old handwritten books are in German scripts. But we are not your brothers. Our German is dead. However hard this may be for some of us older people, it's a blessing for our children. Our children grow up against new backgrounds, new horizons. And they are free. free to grow up.
Dude, what's so crazy about this is that in this period in time, there were so many fucking works of art, including like the Department of War at the time, that would make movies specifically or make propaganda specifically against Nazis. Because at that time, they recognized that like this Nazi shit was taking up root in Western society. And it was a major problem because like you had the German Bund movement, right, in the United States of America, for example. And they literally were like, oh, we have to do something about this shit. This movie was propaganda made by the UK and Canada to get the US to join the war, and it owns. Yeah. Yeah, it was a huge issue because a lot of fucking white people really were like, why are we fighting our brothers? Like, you know what I mean? There were a lot of people at the time who were like, I don't think we should be fighting Nazi Germany at all. I think we should be joining Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany seems awesome. That was a pretty big fucking attitude that, that was a pretty big movement at the time. So, obviously I've shown you examples of like the night of the Madison Square Garden, the massive Nazi rally that took place there, right? So at the time, governments recognized that this was a big danger. So they were making content, they were making propaganda against Nazis. Now, these very same Western governments are making propaganda for Nazis as though they are Nazis. So just remember that. If this kind of like racial superiority myth was so elusive to many people in the Western world, even with the government doing propaganda against it at a time when there was so much more consolidation of information, think about what kind of impact that'll have now when the government is pro-Nazi. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say like that the current American administration is pro-fascism. I think you have to be a real sucker to assume that it's not.
As children, free to run and to laugh, without being forced into uniforms, without being forced to march up and down the streets, singing battle songs. You talk about a new order in Europe. The new order, where there will not be one corner, not a hole big enough for a mouse, where a decent man can breathe freely. You think we hate you, but we don't. It is against our faith to hate. We only hate the power of evil which is spreading over the world. You and your Hitlerism are like the microbes of some filthy disease, filled with a longing to multiply yourselves until you destroy everything healthy in the world. No. We are not your brothers.
Yeah, this is the most well-known don't be a sucker is what I was directly referencing when I was talking about that. This is from the National Archives. This was made by not the Department of Defense, but I believe at the time it was called the Department of War. And it was a series of educational films from 1942 to 1947. Okay. And this item was produced in 1945. And it's about like, it's about fascists trying to suck people into their movement.
I want to give you the truth, folks. The truth about America. I know you've got a lot of questions. You want to know why you're not getting the breaks you deserve? Well, I'm not a politician, but I've made it my business to study these things, and I happen to know the facts. Now, friends, I'm just an average American.
By the way, take note. I've shown this so many times on this broadcast, but it's been many, many years since I've done so. So it's important to fucking show this once again. But take note of the language that the fascist is using. Take note of the language that the fascist is using and recognize that it is identical to the fucking language they use now. Okay? Super simple. I'm just doing common sense. This is the natural order of the land. And I'm not a politician. I'm just telling you like it is. It's always the same shit. Conservatives love conserving talking points. Okay? Reactionaries love to recycle the same garbanzo. That's why there are still motherfuckers who get duped in the big 2025 by 1930s propaganda, bro. How do you fall for fucking propaganda from a time when they didn't even have microwavable dino nuggets? It blows my fucking mind.
But I'm an American, and some of the things I see in this country of ours make my blood boil. I see people with foreign accents making all the money. I see Negroes holding jobs that belong to me and you.
See?
Now I ask you, if we allow this thing to go on, what's going to become of us real Americans?
I've heard this kind of talk before, but I never expected to hear it in America.
Woke Jewish guy. Oh, Jewish guy being woke alert. That's what the current MAGA movement would watch this and be like, nah, dude, that's DEI, brother. That's DEI talking. No. Destroy and delete this woke propaganda.
This fella seems to know what he's talking about.
Yes, he knows all right.
What's the answer? What are we real Americans going to do about it? You'll find it right here in this little pamphlet. The truth about Negroes and foreigners. The truth about the Catholic Church. Now, friend,
I will say the one difference is that back then, everybody loved writing. Okay? Everybody was deep into prose. Okay? Whether every proto-fascist and fascist from fucking Italy, they have their own art movement, futurism, or even like they were all fucking poets. Henry Ford was a classic example of this. That motherfucker wrote nonstop, bro. Oh my God. They loved their pamphlets. Okay? They fucking loved doing their little zines. They loved doing their pamphlets. They loved writing all the time about the secretive nature of the Jew and the blacks or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? But they loved writing. Oh my Lord. And I say this as someone who comes from a socialist background. Everybody loved writing back then. But even the fucking fascists were writing is what I'm saying.
these books are free. Paid for by real Americans who want others to know the truth.
Okay,
Excuse me,
Zine,
young
not
man.
sign. Shut up.
But are you actually going
God, so many fucking crust punks in the chat. It's called Zine. I don't care. Shut up.
to read that stuff?
Sure, why not? You heard what he said, didn't you?
Yes, I heard. But do you believe in that kind of talk?
I don't know, makes pretty good sense to me.
I'm speaking to you as an American. And I tell you, friends, we'll never be able to call this country our own until it's a country without. Without what? Yeah, without what? Without Negroes. Without alien foreigners. Without Catholics. Without Freemasons. You know these people.
Some of the aggro shit is also timely. So for like all the Gen Alpha Gen Z in the chat, they're gonna be like, "What do you mean, Catholics? Like the fuck?" Yes, JFK was the first Catholic American president, and we all know what happened to him. Okay, Brandon is the second. So like, there was a lot of animosity from the founders all the way until I would say like the last 40, 50 years between Protestants and Catholics in this country. I'll give you one additional ironic statement. You have the neo-fascist movement of this country that like says, you know, they're tradcast now. They're like recent Catholic converts, for example, okay? And they will often on the internet say stuff like, "Oh, dude, the Mohammedans, the founders would never want any Muslims to be a part of America. The founders literally were more pro-Muslim than they were pro-Catholic. Okay? Just make no mistake. The founders saw Catholics as their ops. They did not see Muslims as their ops. They saw the Catholics as their ops. Okay? Chat leak. Oh, yeah. New chat leak. Breaking new racist Republican group chats have been leaked to Politico featuring text from Paul Ingratia, Trump's nominee to lead the office of the special counsel. Ingratia's text. Oh, dude, I think woke is back. I think woke is coming back. Ingratia's texts include vile pro-Nazi and racist messages targeting black people, Chinese people, and Indian people. Is woke coming back? I don't know. It seems like it might be. Anyway, we'll continue here. Hold on.
What's wrong with the Masons? I'm a Mason.
See?
Hey, that fella's talking about me.
And that makes a difference, doesn't it?
These are your enemies. These are the people who are
Hey,
trying
that
to take
fellow's
over our
talking about
country.
Masons. I'm a
Now
Freemason.
you know them. You know what they stand for. And it's up to you and me to fight them. Fight them and destroy them before they destroy us. Fight
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson owned the Quran.
Before he said Masons, you were ready to agree with him.
Well, yes, but he was talking about, what about those other people?
But in this country, we have no other people. We are American people, all of us.
I need you to understand. This is the fucking Department of War that made this video. Can you imagine a world where the current Department of War, it's back to Department of War now under the Trump administration. Can you imagine them making a video like this right now? How did this happen? How can people not realize that this is, we are, like, Nazi Germany lost World War II, but fascism won, okay? And it is here. It was Department of War when they were making this propaganda. Then they turned to Department of Defense. And now it's back to Department of War, and they're doing the opposite propaganda. They're doing pro-Nazi propaganda. This was anti-Nazi propaganda.
What about you? You aren't American, are you?
I was born in Hungary, but now I am an American citizen. And I have seen what this kind of talk can do. I saw it in Berlin.
What were you doing there?
I was a professor at the university. I heard the same words we have heard today. But I was a fool then. I thought Nazis were crazy people, stupid fanatics. But unfortunately, it was not so. You see, they knew that they were not strong enough to conquer a unified country. So they split Germany into small groups. They used prejudice as a practical weapon to cripple the nation. Of course, that was not easy to do. They had to work hard to do it.
What Nazi propaganda are they releasing now? Basically the lamest version of it, but it's all like return to tradition. They're doing like, what's it called? There was the aesthetic in like 2016 as well. Like the Department of Homeland Security with regular frequency basically says what that Nazi guy was saying that is positioned as like the bad guy in this in this very famous don't be a sucker anti-fascist propaganda that the Department of War created at the time. Like manifest destiny shit, white nativist sentiment. We have to literally fucking rid the land, rid the homeland, preserve our heritage, rid the homeland of like dangerous migrants. What do you think? What do you think this person is saying? Not this guy, not like the Jewish professor from Hungary, but the fascist was saying that exact same shit.
You see,
this is why I mean, like, the OG anti-fascist was the American government for all of its failures, for all of the internal division, like for all of the anti-black sentiment, for all the misogyny, for all the systematic oppression of women, black people, all different kinds of minorities. America broadly was an anti-fascist force at the time. Okay? It's true. And when you hear what this person is saying in the fucking in the propaganda that the Department of War created, okay, you understand that. He says America is not about other people. America is a nation comprised of other people. This is what makes us good.
we human beings are not born with prejudices. Always they are made for us.
made by someone who wants something. Remember that when you hear this kind of talk. Somebody is going to get something out of it, and it isn't going to be you.
Yeah, don't let it be lost on us that a lot of the people who staffed the positions appointed by the FDR admin that made these films were Soviet sympathizers, trade unionists, and socialists. We were so lucky that FDR was in power during World War II. Yes. 100%. Absolutely. America never had as robust a socialist movement as other Western nations did. That is true. And yet, there was still a lot more motion for the left flank, the socialists, the trade unionists, the communists in this country, as opposed to where it is now. Because post-World War II, all of that was destroyed. With the Red Scare, with the Cold War, all of that was deliberately destroyed, ripped apart. Americans are some of the most propagandized people on the planet, and they don't even realize it.
This is not classroom theory. I saw it happen. I saw it first in Berlin in 1932. 5 young men that I knew were standing in the crowd listening to the Nazi speaker. Eric was a Catholic. Anton, a student of mine, was a Jew. Heinrich owned a small hardware store.
Petit bourgeoisie.
Karl was a farmer. And Hans was an unemployed metal worker.
To all true Aryan Germans, I say it is time you inherited the nation which rightfully belongs to you. To you alone belongs the glorious destiny of the greater Germany. The Nazi Party will provide land for the farmer, work for the worker, and profits for the small businessman. Who is getting these things now? The Jew. The Jew who has stolen our nation and our birthright. Who makes all the money and takes all our jobs? The Jew! He must be shunned. He must be ostracized. He must be eliminated. And the Catholics. We don't want our great nation run by a foreign church. We Germans will know what to do with these people when the time comes. They and their faith must be destroyed. Then there are the Freemasons. In Germany.
By the way, this is post-first Red Scare, so obviously, even in this positioning, you might notice that they're not talking about the number one ops for the Nazis, because remember, this is the American assessment of the propaganda that the Nazis were doing, so it's tailored to whatever the American government's needs are. And if you notice, they're not talking about socialists and trade unionists, because the American government broadly was still at the behest of capital. Okay, this is a big part. This is a big part of the liberal education that has purposely kept a lot of all Americans basically in the dark about the movements that initially resisted the Nazis. Most Americans don't know that the first ops for fascists, both in Italy and also in Nazi Germany, were the socialists, were the communists, were the trade unionists. Okay? I think your Ameribu bias is showing. Wait, what? No, this is not an Ameribu bias. I'm saying like America was broadly a nation united in an anti-fascism when push came to shove. But it was one of the few places where like the liberal and the socialist contingency was in line with one another, as opposed to in all of the other nations where fascism actually took root. It was the liberals and numerous other groups, numerous other identity groups that were reflected in the parliamentary structures that actually allowed the fascists to win control. And oftentimes conceded to the fascists because of their fear that the socialists would dramatically change the established pecking order, the established hierarchy of capitalism. That is a major difference in America as opposed to all these other places. And that's why FDR is such an important figure, because in spite of his liberal background, the FDR coalition And I guess like I guess basically, so we just making shit up. What do you think I'm making up? No, don't ban that guy. I want to know what his worldview looks like. I need to hear it. I think the FDR. I think World War II is very important for American history, and I think FDR is an incredibly important, incredibly pivotal person for American history because, unlike many of the other Western countries that fell to fascism, America, the American liberal movement broadly aligned with or were at least pressured by the socialists to take action in the leftward direction. The New Deal is designed around this this concession afforded to the left flank. Okay? And if you think that there weren't fascist forces in the country doing everything in their power to make America a fascist country, you're not paying attention. I mean, Henry Ford is right there. The business plot that took place. Like there were a lot of fascist industrialists that wanted to make America a fascist country. They tried and they failed. Because if you broadly look at this in the most reductive terms, if you look at the liberals as being like this broad base in the center, they saw fascism as a threat. At least enough of them did. And enough of them were moved in the direction of taking action against it, against fascist countries. Circumstances in Germany. Nazis rise to power from BBC Bite Size. Fear of communism spreading. Communists believed all private ownership of land and assets was theft. Germany's rich landowners and businessmen wanted to prevent communists gaining any political influence at all. The Nazis were violently opposed to communism, and the SA often attacked communist groups in the beer halls and in the streets. This led to many landowners and businessmen supporting the Nazis. It was the petite bourgeoisie. Okay? Effects of the Wall Street crash. The economic crash of the USA in 1929 meant the death of the loans given to Germany under the 1924 Davis Plan were called in. The German economy could not survive, and as a result, businesses closed and many Germans became unemployed. This worsened the situation with a lack of demand for goods, leading to more closures and job losses. I'm not saying this is like the best and most appropriate way to analyze the situation before people yell at me and say, oh, you're using like the GSCE study site, Bite Size. Because while liberals might think this is something to be fearful of, okay, we live in the post-World War II universe. We know what it looked like when liberals did align themselves with the Nazis, with the fascists. We know what that looks like in Italy. We know what that looks like in Germany. In America, that didn't happen. I think looking at the situation, I still think a lack of movement, a lack of like a robust socialist, communist response in this country will allow liberals to align with socialists in general. Some of which might even find themselves to be socialists, but they just never had the tools. They never had the language. They never learned that they might have class consciousness and therefore find themselves on the side of socialists in spite of the propaganda. Because if you look back throughout historic movements, socialists when they had the most motion in Europe, specifically in Germany, pre-Nazi Germany, socialists had so much motion that the socialist revolution was thought to potentially start in Germany as opposed to Russia, an industrialized state, not like a backwater agrarian society led by a brutal czar, but instead a robust industrialized state. But all of the initiatives that socialists took on at the time, all of the strikes that took place, all of the political motion that the socialists had, struck the fear of God in all of the capital owners, whether it be the petit bourgeois small business owners, which made up the backbone of the fascist movement, or large industrialists as well. And the lumpenproles found themselves at the mercy of fascist argumentation. They found themselves feeling slighted by society and looking for a change. Fascism presented that change. But the reason why it's important to reflect on where America was at the time and what America did as opposed to all these other countries is because that coalition swung in the opposite direction as it did in Germany. When liberals lean towards fascists to restore control, the country becomes fascist. When liberals lean towards socialists to combat fascism, they defeat fascism.
We have no place for secret societies. There may be only one society, and that is the Nazi Party. There may be no secrecy about that in the new Greater Germany.
One by one, he attacked each minority and he split them off one from the other. These men were all fellow Germans when they came here today. Now they were split into rival groups, suspicious of each other, hating each other. They were being swindled, all of them. But the man who was really being...
The Germans were wrong in World War I and World War II. They deserve what happened to them, and turning to Nazi fascism isn't justified. Wait, what? There is not a single person that would say that this is justifiable. In this community, at least. Are you lost, chatter? Hello? No, brave take. Wow. Brave take. The Holocaust was bad, and the perpetrators of the Holocaust deserve what they got. Agreed. Okay? What's next? Are you going to tell us about how fucked up pedophilia is? Like, yeah, no, we know, man. Truth nuke.
Food was Hans. He was pure German, according to Nazi standards. To him, they promised everything, and he fell for it.
You who are true Aryan Germans will share the glorious destiny of our fatherland. You are the pure-blooded, the master race. It is your divine right to rule, and the Nazi Party stands ready to put you into power. It is for you to command all Germany, and someday the entire world.
That's how Hans became a Superman. They gave him a uniform and they pumped up his ego. He wasn't just a little fellow out of work anymore. He was
I'm just saying, notice how there's no conversation taking place here because this is an American propaganda piece about how the Nazis divided German society and how they seized control of German society. And for some weird reason, they're not talking about socialists at all.
Member of the master race. His wife couldn't quite understand. Even though he was a Superman, there wasn't any food in the house. Stupid woman. Didn't she realize that the Nazis were going to make jobs for everybody? There would be plenty of food and clothing and a new house. Everything they wanted. The glorious future of Germany was to be theirs.
Yeah, the Lumpenproll gets promised unimaginable power if they actually redesign society on this ridiculous racial superiority dynamic. A promise of prosperity for the Lumpenprolls as long as they join in the Gestapo. Wow. I just can't seem to think. It's just $50,000, up to $100,000 in signing bonuses and $50,000 in student loan all student loan debt relief abolished if you join ICE today. It's just, and wait, and the goal seems similar. All of the non-persons need to be sent to concentration camps. Not for any crime, mind you, because the real crime is the fact that they don't have, this government has not given them the proper documentation for decades and strung them along. I just can't see the parallels at all, dude. I just can't. What could this be?
And their children would someday rule the world. But his wife, silly woman, still wondered where the next meal was coming from. Hans didn't like that kind of talk. It was dangerous. For that kind of talk, people should be put in jail. Hans had swallowed the bait all right. And these were the men who baited the hook. Why? So that Hans could come to power?
But it's not concentration camps in the U.S. now, right? Brother, the only reason why you don't see the concentration camps we have as concentration camps is because you still believe that the American government is a nation of rules and laws. They literally designed alligator Alcatraz, dude. What more do you need to see? We have for-profit prisons in this fucking country. I don't know how to explain it to people. Go into my little Hitler club. Sorry, I'm late. My bitch wife doesn't get it.
Of course not. So they could come to power. They would merely use Hans to help them get there. He would do the dirty work for them. Hans and thousands of others like him, all playing a sucker's game. They gambled with other people's liberty, and of course they lost their own. A nation of suckers. Hitler needed these people. There was lots of work to be done. There were trade unions to be smashed, because unions were organized and might offer resistance. There were many political parties.
Oh, first mention of trade unions, okay.
In Germany. These the Nazis destroyed.
Social Democratic Party. What else?
They were determined to smash every organization.
Okay. Mass meeting of the Communist
where
Party.
People might band together and resist them. There were Jews to be beaten and killed. The Jews were not powerful, but they were a convenient excuse for all the nation's ills. And besides, a Nazi party member could not take over this man's...
Nazis are socialists, though. Yeah, I love when people say that, because the greatest counter is the urinal cake. Come on, brother, dig in. Yeah. Well, I guess that's a urinal cake. Time to dig in, you know? I love that. Is this about Israel? To a certain degree, yes. Israel is not dissimilar to what is taking place here, but instead of the Bolshevik Jews being destroyed and put in concentration camps, it is the Arabs and the anti-Zionists that are being destroyed.
Hundreds of Catholics were put in jail because the Catholic Church had strength.
I don't get the reference. Can you explain it? Yes. The Nazis called themselves the National Socialist Party. Okay. And some of the dumbest people in society will say, oh, well, the Nazis were socialist, except their number one ops were socialists. They killed. So the first people that they put in concentration camps were the communists and the socialists. And Hitler himself very openly said they were not socialist, it was simply, they were simply for the folk, the Aryan folk. Okay. And the reason why people say, well, that's a urinal cake, then dig in is just because something is just because people refer to themselves a certain way, or just because we call something by a certain name doesn't mean that it's actually the same, it's actually the genuine thing. Some of the dumbest in society, including Pierre Poilievre. I know. National Socialist German Workers' Party.
Drive for power. They had split the nation into 100 pieces, and then one by one, they had destroyed the pieces. Over these broken pieces, the Nazis rode into power. One party, one nation, one religion. These men had won their struggle for power. They now ruled all of Germany. But still they had trouble with their oldest and most persistent enemy, the truth. They found that truth does not die easily, and so they decided to abolish truth. One great source of truth is literature, so they burned books, 20 million of them. Many great men in...
Just I'm sensing a lot of familiarities with what the fucking Nazis were doing, especially when I think about the current administration. Now, the major difference, I will say, is that, and this is going to confuse a lot of people, confuse a lot of Americans in particular. America is a liberal country. Liberalism is monoculture. And I don't mean liberalism in the way that like Republicans and Democrats use it in this country. I mean liberalism as like a political theory that revolves around the protection of private capital, right? Private property, private capital. So Republicans are liberals as well, except in previous formations, as liberalism was seemingly failing in the rise of fascism in both Italy and Germany, and there was an alternative called socialism. Fascists themselves actually came as a completely separate unit, a completely separate new movement. Now we are actually watching the far-right party, the Republican Party, move away from liberalism to fascism rather than create an entirely new movement that says it's done, liberalism is over. And the center-right party, the Democratic Party, is playing a similar role that previous liberal formations did by capitulating to this change in power, to this ideological change that's taking place within the Republican Party. That is the major difference here. It's not a new third movement, a new third position, but rather it is one that is coming from within. Because both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in this country are liberal parties. But the far-right liberal party, the Republican Party, is now restructuring itself to be a fascist party. The only benefit we have, of course, to combat against this is history. We know what fascists have done when they seize control. And a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people have learned that that is wrong and bad. So that's what I mean when I say you should never compromise on being anti-fascist.
Germany who were spokesmen for truth were jailed or driven from their country. Teachers, writers, scientists. Education was discouraged. In 5 years, college attendance dropped 53%. It was forbidden to listen to a British radio.
Another difference is Hitler had broad popular support that the Republicans don't have. Germany was broadly on board with a lot of the stuff the Nazis wanted to do. Same with Mussolini. Mussolini came from being a band of Lumpenproll brigands and war veterans to one that actually successfully democratically won the last election. It grew with the legitimization. And just like with Mussolini, there was a lot of help from liberal elements and previous parliamentary formations that actually presented him as the alternative, in the same way that the Nazis were also aided by liberals and those who were afraid of the violence that the Nazis were engaging in. And once they actually seized the power, once they actually got to a position of power, then their popularity increased.
Your program, or read an American newspaper. In Nazi Germany, you had to get your information from Dr. Goebbels. He knew what was best for you.
Anyway, the rest of this is just like, talking about how the Nazis control flows of communication, stuff like that. But overall, the biggest issue is obviously to remind liberals of what fascism looks like and to not actually fall mercy to the propaganda of fascists and to fight back against fascists instead. And that requires a broad popular front. Because fascism is very captivating for a lot of the dispossessed. It's very captivating for a lot of the unemployed, a lot of the angry. You want me to finish the video? Okay, we'll finish.
See this movie.
Sure, fuck it, why not?
Or listen to this music.
I wanted to go back to covering the no
And you
Jews
couldn't
protests
watch
and
Joe
whatnot.
Louis fight because the champion had black skin. He disproved Hitler's theory of Nordic supremacy. Albert Einstein, one of the world's great scientists, disproved that theory too. He was non-Aryan, so he had to leave Germany. His mind was dedicated to the search for truth, and the Nazis, having sold a lie, were most afraid of truth. The church was one force in Germany still strong enough to proclaim the truth in public.
No doubt is possible that we Christians are in a grave battle. Against us stands a faith out of
Einstein was also socialist.
blood. The battle signals range from cool repudiation to hate-filled causes. Weapons are used that centuries have dulled. The aim of this battle is to dislodge Christianity from our fatherland.
This Catholic priest was arrested the following day on charges of immorality. The Protestant church also continued to try and fight for truth.
He who desires liberty for himself cannot deny it to others, lest he lose what he has gained. This is the great lesson the world can learn from Germany.
The Nazis put this man in a concentration camp. There were others who spoke for truth, and I am proud to say that educators were among them.
And what, may I ask, is an Aryan? I don't know myself. But let us see what our present so-called authorities have to say about it. They say he is tall, slender, blue-eyed, and blonde. There is no Aryan race. And
They're still doing woke. This is the early makings of woke. Okay, They're dunking on him. They're dunking on him in the same way that we dunk on Trump, using the exact same terminology,
More
too.
important, there is no master race. There are people who may find these ideas convenient.
This is vintage
but
woke.
science cannot support them. There is no scientific proof that there's any correlation between a man's racial characteristics and his native ability or character. In all racial groups, we find the same range of potentialities. We find idiots and geniuses. We find criminals and philanthropists. We must judge each man as an individual.
What is this woke nonsense, dude? What the fuck do you mean? What is this DEI? Brother, he's doing DEI. How dare you say we must actually test the measure of man by their qualities and not their characteristics such as racial superiority? How dare you?
And not by the color of his skin.
No,
or his...
I don't want to hear it. I'm thinking of a German hog. A German hog in the 40s been like, oh mein Gott, this is unbelievable. He is doing the woke propaganda. He's doing the woke propaganda. Nein, nein, nein. Ich kann nicht glauben. Nein.
Eyes, or by the length of his nose.
Take him away.
Come in, gentlemen. Make yourselves comfortable. There are many differences between individuals. We each have different capabilities, different backgrounds, different views about what's right and what's wrong. Like the difference between me and these gentlemen who have just arrived. But that is not the difference in race. It is a difference in the way we think. Remember that. And remember that there is no master race. That is a scientific truth. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying.
Nein, take him away. Take him away.
And so for all practical purposes,
He is doing
truth had been abolished in Germany. A lot of my German friends wondered what had hit them. How did it happen? Where did it start? It started right here. And this was where it could have been stopped. If those people had stood together, if they had protected each other, they could have resisted the Nazi threat. Together they would have been strong. But once they allowed themselves to be split apart, they were helpless.
If only there was a unifying... If only there was a unifying, principled stance that people could take together, whether it be a united front built around a different position, not some inalienable characteristics, but a united anti-fascist front, and that is born out of the desire to liberate people from the struggles that they experience by virtue of their class.
That first minority lost out, everybody lost out. They made the mistake of gambling.
Without the support of liberal bourgeois, fascism would have been obliterated 100%, but liberal bourgeois were terrified of a socialist revolution, and therefore they saw fascists as stamping out all of the socialists violently. All of the socialist movements were squashed by militant fascism.
With other people's freedom. Now let's see how those bets paid off.
This is the unfortunate limitation of liberalism. This is the unfortunate limitations of liberalism, because liberalism still wants to maintain a capitalist order of the economy. That's what liberals want. So if their highest priority is profits and the preservation of profits, as opposed to evolving towards a more egalitarian society with a better distribution of resources designed around commodity production at the point of commodity production that gives more autonomy to all workers, liberals will inevitably allow fascists and support fascists and allow fascists to win. That is where we're at right now. Look at all of these supposedly quote unquote libertarian tech CEOs. Okay. Fascism is, of course, evolved. Fascism has evolved. It is much more diverse, for example, and they don't have the same singling out of Jews in America, for example, as they did initially in Germany, right? It is not like they're not using, it's the same energy, but they're not using the same targets. And that doesn't mean that it will stay that way, of course, because, these guys do love going back to the same old racial pecking order. They love preserving the same talking points. The optics are a little different, but overall, the methods are quite similar. The talking points are quite similar. The targets are still pretty similar as well. It's just, they hate Muslims and trans people now. No, fascists hated trans people back then too. Like, we just saw the book burnings. One of the first, they said all manner of queer culture was actually moral degeneracy. Those book burnings, the first most famous book burning was all the medical research revolving around trans people at the time. So, no, they hated the minorities.
Carl the farmer was gambling on a better life for himself. What he got was extra hours of back-breaking work, as much as 100 hours a week. He was forced to stay on his land and produce what he was told to produce, because now Hitler was preparing for war. For Heinrich, who owned a hardware store, the bet didn't pay off either. 104,000 small businesses were closed in 2 years. And for Hans, conditions hadn't improved any. He had a job now in the munitions factory, but he worked long hours for little pay. The working conditions grew increasingly bad. And even though he didn't like the job, he wasn't permitted to leave it.
I'm confused. I thought these guys were socialists. What happened? It turns out they were just nationalists. And the reason why they were using socialism as a marketing tool was because socialism was objectively very popular at the time. That's it.
There still wasn't enough food in his house. Hitler said you couldn't have butter and cannon. So Hans couldn't have butter. And when Hitler decided the time was right, Germany went to war. Not by declaring war, but by a carefully prepared sneak attack. Once again, Hitler needed Hans to do his dirty work. Hans was an expert at brutality by this time, and Hitler had decided to use Hans and his brutality against other peoples, the Czechs, the Poles, the French, the Russians. But in the crucial test of war, Hitler's race theories didn't pay off. His pure-blooded supermen were defeated by the mongrel armies he despised. By the British at El Alamein. By the Russians at Stalingrad. And then on...
This was too close to the end of World War II for them to not factor in the USSR as a positive force. Okay. It is pretty wild that like this is barely reflected on even here and now. But nowadays, Americans don't even fucking know that. It's crazy.
D-Day by American soldiers of every color and religion who smashed across the Normandy beaches and drove on through to the heart of Germany. For the misguided Germans who had swallowed the Nazi bait, the Nazi game did not pay off.
Nope.
The continent of Europe was strewn with millions of German bodies, pure Aryan bodies. Karl, the farmer, was left in the snow outside of Moscow.
L.
Heinrich stayed in Italy at Salerno.
L.
And Hans, who was going to rule the world, got only a little patch of Normandy that he could call his own. We must never let that happen to us or to our country. We must never let ourselves be divided by race or color or religion, because in this country we all belong to minority groups. I was born in Hungary. You are a Mason. These are minorities. And then you belong to other minority groups too. You are a farmer. You have blue eyes. You go to the Methodist Church. Your right to belong to these minorities is a precious thing. You have a right to be what you are and say what you think, because here we have personal freedom. We have liberty. And these are not just fancy words. This is a practical and priceless way of living. But we must work at it. We must guard everyone's liberty, or we can lose our own. If we allow any minority to lose its freedom by persecution or by prejudice, we are threatening our own freedom. And this is not simply an ideal. This is good, hard common sense.
You are amazing. You're a minority. Such a funny line in the modern day. Also, obviously, while this video was being shot, and it openly said that like black people were being singled out by the fascists, America still had segregation, peak segregation, as a matter of fact. So just remember that.
You see, here in America, it's not a question whether we tolerate.
And camps too, yeah. I mean, this is the, we're talking about like what came after this was a tail end of the Bracero program, something that Donald Trump loves talking about fondly, ironically enough, which is Operation WB. And no word about Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. I mean, there's no word about appeasement as well. I don't know if you realize that. This is just like a domestic focus about potential fascism growing in America after World War II. I love that like liberals learned one thing and they think this is like this is the most like consequential like anti-socialist thing they can say. Oh, dude, what about Ribbentrop-Molotov? Fucking own, dude. Okay, well, what about fucking appeasement? Like, what do you mean?
Minorities. America is minorities. And that means you and me. So let's not be suckers. We must not allow the freedom or dignity of any man to be threatened by any act or word. Let's be selfish about it. Let's forget about we and they. Let's think about us.
Yeah, see, United States of America War Office. That's back when it was called the Department of War, by the way, which we changed to Department of Defense, which of course changed back now, but this time fascistly. Back when it was the OG Department of War, it was anti-fascist, objectively an anti-fascist force, right? Now it is objectively becoming a fascist force if we allow it. Anyway, speaking of before we get to the new Republican leaks, unsurprising pro-Hitler leaks, Christian Smalls has a take that I don't fully agree with. He says, we are nowhere near ready for a general strike in a country with union membership density in the gutter. Doesn't matter who's calling it and how many times. Other countries' general strikes are being led by socialist communist unions we do not have in the U.S. The last part I do agree with. The first part I do not agree with. Because Despite our union density being in the gutter, he's absolutely correct. It's around 9%. It's actually horrible. And we don't even have like sectoral contracts, for example, like they do in all these other countries like France and whatnot. The reality of the matter is, because of the way that our just-in-time manufacturing works, American unions, even in one sector, not even a general strike, but even in one sector, could entirely cripple the economy. They could just shut everything down. Longshoremen could shut everything down if they chose to do so. The Teamsters could shut everything down if they chose to do so. Not likely to happen with the current leadership structure that exists. But like, there are so many major bottlenecks, dock workers, transportation. There are so many ways in which this country could shut down in its entirety. Okay, because everything is interconnected in ways that previously were not foreseeable, where it wasn't previously done. You could literally, even with one sector union, you could actually straight up put the economy at a standstill. Railroads, for example. Obviously, it would be illegal for them to do so, but I'm just saying, like, if push came to shove, there is that opportunity. The United States was not objectively anti-fascist. They had countless under-the-table agreements with Germany and Italy during World War II. I overall think the U.S. government was trying to protect its neoliberal order. It's the Democrat dance to death, walking the line between true progressive politics, socialism, and regressive reactionary politics, fascism. Yes, I don't fully disagree with you on that, but my point was that they moved objectively in an anti-fascist way. That's it. They did do that. They played a formative role in ending both Nazi and Italian fascism. They did. And I think that was because that is because the allegiance that the liberals had in order to protect a neoliberal order, which neoliberalism didn't exist at the time, for the record, chatter. That wasn't a principled stance that they had. They were just liberals. Okay. And it played a role in the liberal order that they wanted to maintain, for sure, but it wasn't an international order in the way that it works now either. We were not as interconnected. You have to remember that. But it was absolutely an instance where you had liberals align in the United States of America with more radical left elements as opposed to more radical right elements. Let's escape the two-party plantation first. Then we can talk about the general strike until stop calling on general strike from unions who support bipartisan genocide and refuse to support grassroots moves and continuously allow politics to lead their organizations. Yeah, there is a real problem with the way that the union structure works in this country, though. That is true. There is definitely an issue with like how corporate and how I don't want to say selfish, but like the way that a lot of unions operate in this country is definitely designed to be as toothless as possible.